Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Colony Drop, a Gundam podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Isaac. This is your favorite Gundam podcast where we talk about everything from the anime series to the model kits to the movies to even the manga. Ooh, yeah.
Oh, the manga. What are we talking about today, Isaac?
Today we're actually talking about a manga. This is our first time talking about a manga. For those of you not in the know, a manga is a Japanese comic book, essentially, graphic novel. And today we'll be talking about Mobile Suit Gundam F90.
We thought it would be a good idea to take a trip into the UC Next 100 years, because that's where Gundam is going, based on the Next 100 project. So we thought we should go there too. One of the earlier mangas to come out in the next 100 years of the Universal Century is Gundam F90. This manga was published in 1990 to 1991. It's 8 chapters, so it's pretty short. Basically, it was compiled into one volume, and then it also spawned a line of model kits at the time. It is set in UC 0120, so a little bit before the movie Gundam F91.
Essentially a generation after really the conclusion of anything involving Neo Zeon and Char's counterattack. So enough time has gone by.
I don't want to say it's a clean slate, but it's definitely after all the noise.
It's a new chapter. We'll say that. It's a new chapter. New faces, new chapters, new Gundam.
Yeah. So I had not read Gundam F90 prior to reading it for this podcast. Had you read it before, Isaac?
No. I vaguely knew a little bit about it, very little. But I wasn't specifically sure if what I knew was about F90 or some other, one of the other mangas for Gundam or something. But yeah, this was my first time reading it. I went into it more or less blind.
Yep, same with me. I mean, whatever I knew about F90 was, from reading about the mobile suits, 15 years ago, 20 years ago on MAHQ. So it was fun to actually, read the actual story and be like, oh, that's what happens.
Yeah, going into it though, like, what did you think before you read it, if I could ask? Like, did you have any preconceived ideas about what it would be about?
No, I mean, I knew that it was about something to do with the Mars Zeon or the Oldsmobile Army.
Okay.
And that it was a prologue or prequel to Gundam F91. And clearly, I mean, if you're a fan of Gundam and you've seen the movie Gundam F91 and you see a manga called Gundam F90, then clearly it's named to show that it's a prequel. It's sort of self-explanatory.
I don't know. I thought I confused this with another one. I was like, oh, I remember Mars Zeon and like the Oldsmobile Army, but they must be something else. Gundam F90, the bad guys must be Crossbone Vanguard or something. But no, Crossbone Vanguard doesn't even show up in this series at all.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. Maybe they wanted to put sort of the final note, just the final end on anything remotely Zeon. Like, all that's left are some guys on Mars. Like, literally, this is the end.
Yep. I don't know. To me, I thought it was kind of refreshing to go in not knowing anything about a Gundam series. I think if you've seen a lot of the anime over the years and you've done enough research, you kind of pick up a lot of things about maybe even some of the anime series that you have not seen. You sort of end up knowing a lot about it before you start it, if you don't watch it when it comes out. So I thought it was kind of fun to read a Gundam story that I didn't know anything about.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to disappoint any listeners, but Gundam manga aren't very high on my list of things to consume that's Gundam related. I really kind of prefer, the movies, the models, OVAs, anime series, whatever. But yeah, I'm not too big on the mangas. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because, I don't know why, for whatever reason. So I went into this blind and I had a really good time reading it, Brian. I'm really glad we decided to do this because this was a fun story. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a fun story. It was very self-contained, which I enjoyed. You didn't need to know too much history about Gundam to enjoy it. I don't think. You definitely would have picked up on a lot of stuff if you did. But it was, 8 chapters, sort of in and out. Real, didn't overstay its welcome. On that note, Isaac, I don't think that Gundam mangas are high on a lot of people's lists, especially ones like this one from 1990, right?
Right.
If you're sitting here in the year 2020 and you're looking for a new manga to read, generally you're not looking for one that's 30 years old. Generally, people are gonna be reading the newer new things that come out every week, the newer big series. So I was thinking, should we do a quick sort of like plot rundown? Because whereas a Gundam anime series maybe a lot of listeners have seen, I don't think a lot of people have read Gundam F90.
Probably not, and that's a brilliant idea. Let's give them a synopsis. Yeah, go for it, Brian.
Okay. All right. So the story opens in UC 0120. We see a transport ship called the Kobayashi Maru, which is clearly a Star Trek reference. And it's a transport ship. I believe it's coming back from Jupiter, and it gets sunk by sort of unseen mobile suits sort of suddenly. They're kind of just going along, and then the Minovsky.
So weird.
It was very odd. Yeah, I don't really know that was even needed in the story. I guess it was just to establish that there is a new threat out there. Because like you said, it's been a while since Neo Zeon, the last Neo Zeon uprising, and so it should sort of be a time of peace. So
yeah, I guess for the first few pages, they wanted us to kind of, I don't know, hold our breath as far as who the enemy could be. Who could have done this?
Yep. And then we fast forward, I think it's 3 days, and we see our three sort of protagonists who have great 90s names, I must say. Sort of I'll call him the main protagonist. His name is Def Stallion. I mean, wow, last name Stallion. Love that right there off the bat.
Yeah.
You got his pal Sid Amber, and they are piloting two Gundam F90s, which I thought was actually a really cool visual, given that we don't often see two Gundams right away in the same sort of show.
Right, I guess they're kind of routine at this point in the in the Federation military. No, but they're actually just testing them. But I mean, I guess it kind of, I don't know, gives you a wink and a nudge, like, oh, there's two Gundams here, and they're training together. I wonder what's going to happen later on. So.
Yeah, I don't think that the plot in this will surprise anyone, but that doesn't necessarily take away from its quality. So
yeah.
And the third protagonist we meet during this test mission is Navi. She's a girl. I don't know that she has she has a given last name in the story, but she is piloting a gun ST, or an ST gun, which is basically just the J-gun modified for reconnaissance. Has this kind of like dorky looking, I don't know, head attachment on it.
Yeah. So what, I forgot what her full title is. I think she's like tactical analyst or something. Something a tactical analyst would fly in combat.
Right. During this test mission, they get ambushed by what the manga refers to as the Oldsmobiles, which it is sort of a term that in our world people would use to refer to old cars. And why is that, Isaac? Who are they being attacked by?
They're being attacked by Zeon remnants that fled to Mars. So these guys, I mean, they clearly didn't take a factory with them, so they can't just pump out new designs of mobile suits. So what they have are just old mobile suits from not even Shard's counterattack. I mean, sure, they have a few of those, but they have like original Zaku's and stuff like that. I think they have Rick Doms. So these are like 1 year war type suits. So I think Zeon clearly sent some fleet or a few ships to Mars way back when, and these guys have been there ever since. Yeah,
I think the first one we see is a Rick Dom, and so when I saw that, I smiled because I was like, oh well, Isaac will at least like the manga at this point.
Yep,
right now.
I remember. I was like, a Rick Dom. I like these guys already.
That first sort of test flight goes sort of poorly for our heroes. Sid his suit kind of malfunctions a bit, and he ends up getting out of his suit, which is probably a bad idea during combat. But he does shoot out the Dom's like eye, which, I guess that's impressive. Things are looking bad for them, and then the Gundam F90's capital ship shows up. It's a Rakai Loom class, the Admiral Tianum.
I love that name. When I read that, I was like, oh yeah. I mean, that guy did so much work in the 1 year war. They should name a ship after him.
It only makes sense, right? We saw the General Rebel back in Unicorn, and so it makes sense to see an Admiral Tianum ship.
There you go.
And so when that ship shows up, the Oldsmobiles, they retreat, probably not wanting to get wasted by this very advanced capital ship compared to their Zaku 2, their Rickdom, and their Gelgoog, I believe. So probably a smart idea on their part. Sid and Def and Navi, they retreat back to the Admiral Tianum, and the Admiral Tianum ends up docking at the Frontier 1 colony inside 4, where the Earth Federation is now sort of set up a base of operations to make the next generation of mobile suits. And their goal is to make them smaller and faster. And what is that place called, Isaac?
SNRI is the Strategic Naval Research Institute. It's pretty much the replacement for Anaheim Electronics. Apparently, somebody with common sense at the top of Federation government realized Anaheim Electronics couldn't be trusted, to hold a book of matches. So they decided to finally make their own military research institute that can create mobile suit designs, Gundam designs, and would be more or less under the military's direct control. And that's what we get, the SNRI. And the first thing they build are miniature mobile suits. In that first battle with the old Zeon mobile suits, the F90 is noticeably smaller, but it's also more maneuverable. So I thought that was pretty cool. There's actually kind of a funny scene where I think a Gelgoog is like holding the F90 from behind, and it looks like, I don't know, it looks like somebody like holding their little brother up or something.
The F90s are probably what, 2/3 the size of a normal suit? Like it's noticeably smaller.
Yeah, I don't know. Like if the Gelgoogs look like basketball players, and then the F90s were average height people. Yeah, that's the closest. Yeah. Unless you look at the comic, that's the closest comparison I can give to people.
So once back inside the Tianum, and they're inside 4, they get new orders to basically seek out the Mars Zeon's base on Mars and kind of destroy it. So this manga moves real quick. We went from one sort of attack to go wipe them out at their base. So very, very swift orders here from the Federation government. One thing I did like about this manga, Isaac, is they did not sort of just jump to Mars, right? And that's because Mars is pretty far given our technology, or the technology in the Universal Century. Universal Century does not have, light speed travel or even like what people would call sub light speed travel, that's like very fast. So they go, okay, let's go to Mars, and they say, okay, well, it's gonna take how long?
3 months. It was like They gave an exact time frame. They're like, it's going to be 3 months and like 6 weeks or something like that.
Yeah. So I thought that was really cool. That was a really good, realistic take on it. And while they were here, one big part of the story, which becomes important later, is their commander Bosch tells them that he helped Amuro push back Axis in a GM3, which was pretty cool. I would say that's a good way to have a callback to an older series. What did you think about that line, Isaac?
I thought that was pretty brilliant, because we don't really get things like that very often, where somebody was at a specific battle and then also can name like somebody was there at the same time, right? I mean, you never really hear Gato saying, I was flying with Char at Solomon or something like that. Right. That never happens, right? Or, oh yeah, me and Dozel were mopping him up. It's very rare. So for him to name drop Amuro, that was cool. And then for him to also refer to that he was actually there means, I felt like it really tied into how forward into the future we are, because that meant Bosch would have had to been an ensign or some type of, low-ranking cadet, right? Just a grunt pilot. And then now he's commanding his own little squadron. So clearly he moved up the ranks.
Yeah, he's definitely a senior officer at this point.
Yeah.
So on their way to Mars, the first suspicious thing happens in this series. And it's in the chapter called Suspicion. No coincidence. But the Admiral Tianum, along with the fleet, they didn't just go alone. They took a fleet to go destroy this base. They hit a mine, like an explosive mine in space, in a random location in space. And our hero Navi, she seems a little bit suspicious about this. And so she does some research and figures out the odds of hitting a random mine is super low, especially like a moving ship. So she concludes that the Mars Zeon must know the location of this fleet and must know that they're coming, and that there is a traitor on board. So at this point, Isaac, who did you think the traitor was?
I thought it was one of the pilots. I don't know how, or I don't know. I thought maybe Sid. But
I thought the same. I thought Sid getting out of his mobile suit
also
in the first battle I thought was very suspicious. And I also thought the captain seemed a bit suspicious. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Novotnoy or something like that.
I thought it was like Novatoni.
Novatoni. Okay, maybe yeah.
But
that makes way more sense than Novotnoy, by the way.
Right? I think they drew the captain in a way that we would suspect him, because in a few panels he looks a little sinister.
He does.
I mean, there's something else going on there that we kind of get to, but also, man, he just looked like a bit of a sinister guy. I wasn't sure if this is going to be our bright Noah. No, it's not.
Not at all.
Yeah, my two leading contenders were Captain. I don't know how that worked, how he ended up being a traitor, or Sid, who also, really, this is the traitor. This is who they're relying on.
Yeah, inept Sid. Because not only did they draw him to be sinister, but he sort of didn't really care about Navi when she told him about her theory. So, not caring about the lives of the crew definitely made you suspect him for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So then they finally arrive at Mars after doing some training, and they plan an attack, a very elaborate re-entry attack going into the Mars atmosphere. We're very quickly told that the Mars Zeon's base is basically inside Olympus Mons, which is a big mountain on Mars. And I thought there was a line in there that I thought was pretty neat. The captain said it would be the first battle on a foreign planet in history, which I thought was cool.
Oh, yeah. God, nothing happens around Mars. We would have heard by now. So, yeah. I mean, the first multiple things, right? The first planetary assault, the first invasion coming from Earth, the first planetary battle. Yeah, boy.
Poor Mars. The human war just follows humans wherever we go.
There we go.
So the Tiananmen fleet is, maybe I should use a different word, not the Tiananmen fleet from the 1 Year War, but the what do they call themselves? The 13th
independent
autonomous assault fleet or something like that.
Yeah.
So the 13th fleet, we'll call them. They're going along swimmingly. They're doing their reentry plan, and then suddenly the Minovsky particle density increases, just like the beginning with what happened to the Kobayashi Maru. And what comes out, Isaac?
What comes out is something I had no idea I would ever see again. Adzoms, however you pronounce it. Yep. Zeon sent Adzoms, which, if you don't recall, were mobile armors that were, how do I describe them? 4-legged giant purple kind of mobile armor walking type of kind of mobile bases, but these ones were latched onto an asteroid and refitted for space combat. I think the captain or maybe another officer saw this and he clearly was familiar with it, but he said, "Really, in space?" or something like that.
Yeah, and then they fired on them, and it didn't work because they've been updated and they had been coated in the beam deflection coating. I would assume kind of like the Hyakushiki. So then, during that attack, who reveals himself to be the traitor?
Bosch, their squadron commander.
The jovial man who told us the story about Amuro turns out to be the bad guy.
Right. It was like, what? You were a Federation pilot. What are you doing?
I wonder how long he's had this plot going. Must have been a long time.
Yeah. I was trying to work backwards. I was like, okay, was he a child of Zeon? And then this was like a multi-generation plant or something like that, like a Soviet level spy where they send you over as a kid and they just raise you. Or, I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. And I was like, no, this guy, he turned. He's a traitor. And I think even Novatoni, I think, calls him a traitor or something like that to his face.
I agree. It being a 40-year plant would be Metal Gear Solid level plotting. So I agree. I think he had to turn later on. So he reveals himself to be the traitor. He pulls a gun on the captain. He takes over the bridge of the Admiral Tiananmen.
He wasn't by himself. He had some goons. Does that mean he convinced other people on board to join Zeon, like way before the mission started, or were somehow Zeon troops snuck aboard? They were Federation guys then, right? They had to be. That's the only explanation.
I agree. We did not see them enter, so I just assumed that they were there the whole time. Okay. Because they were also, if you notice, they had changed into their full like Mars Zeon regalia. I guess they had no one noticed those like in their closets or something. I don't know.
Nobody knows them like the night before, just ironing their Zeon uniforms. Like,
What do you
hey
got there?
Lopez, what you got over there, Lopez? It's like, oh, this is it's memorabilia,
Yeah, maybe they were going to like the Universal Century equivalent of like a Civil War reenactment or something.
Like, oh, we need these for our live performance role playing game where we pretend to be Zeon characters in the last war.
Yeah.
Find us. Yeah.
And while this is happening, our heroes they're no longer on the Admiral Tianum because they're in this sort of like drop ship that was mid re-entry. And
multiple dropships get sent out.
Yes. This whole mission was overkill for the poor Zeon remnants on Mars. And they kind of can't really do anything because their suits are strapped down. They're really not supposed to come out of the ship until they land on Mars. And so two of the Adzoms land on their ship, and they're going to break the ship open and kind of kill all of our heroes. So our heroes decide to land the ship with the Adzoms on them. That ends up blowing up the Adzoms, and I think our heroes kind of pass out, and we meet them again a little bit later once they've landed on Mars. But meanwhile, Bosch still has control of the Tianum, and so he starts shooting the Federation ships that resist his call to surrender with the Admiral Tianum, which is pretty sad for those ships because they were all, the Tianum is clearly the biggest one in the fleet, and so the other ships are just getting taken out by the Tianum's big guns.
Right. Yeah.
Although kind of ends up not really working out for Bosch because one of those ships he shoots down accidentally collides with like Phobos, which is I think one of Mars's moons, and that causes a bunch of rocks to fall all over the place, and then that actually takes out one of the other Adzoms too. So bit of an oops there on his move.
We can't replace those Adzoms.
They're classics.
We lost them in the opening battle.
We then meet back up with our heroes who have now landed on Mars, and they sort of get out, and who's coming to attack them but the Oldsmobile army. They pull a little bit of a feint, I think. So one thing I guess I would say is sometimes Gundam mangas, because you're looking at mobile suits the whole time, sometimes the action isn't super clear as exactly what's going on, as it would be if you're reading something with like human characters. It's a little easier to tell what they're doing. There's a lot of like machine parts in mobile suits that make it sometimes confusing. So did I understand that correctly? When they were on Mars and the Oldsmobile guys came over to inspect their ship, they must have set it to self-destruct?
That's what I pieced together, but I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. Gundam mangas can be great. There's great ones out there. But I think one of the issues is the speed sometimes at which mobile suit combat happens is portrayed much better, 10 times better on the screen compared to, I know some people might be thinking, oh, well, there's great comic books and stuff like that with, superheroes and stuff. Yes. But in those situations, we're looking at human characters usually moving at human speed, and it's easier for us to sort of track as the story plays out in our mind. I know what scene you're talking about exactly. Navi it's implied that she set an explosive, right? Because she's like their technical person, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. They like, I don't know why these mobile suits all thought they stood on like the same cliff together or something like that, right? If I was reading it right, like the whole squad of Zeon mobile suits decided to stand on the same spot, and then like the next frame they got turned into a mushroom cloud.
Yeah. So I was kind of like, well, I guess they blew him up.
Yeah. They're leaving, and then Navi's like, "Oh, she says something like, I'm really glad you guys are probably really glad you have like the tactical analyst with you or something, or it was really easy for a tactical analyst to do that or whatever." Pat herself on the back, but I mean, very impressive, right? She, using an explosive or the ship, she just took out, a whole squad pursuing them. So
right, yeah, MVP Navi right there. But then eventually, there were clearly more Oldsmobile suits than just those that went to go check out the suit. So our heroes get sort of ambushed from the back, and a Gelgoog starts to harass Navi. Navi's Jagan, her ST gun, I don't think it's probably the most battle-ready mobile suit out there. So, right. She gets sort of captured fairly easily. She's really upset about that she was kind of useless. And we got some cool designs here. We got to see a sort of an updated Zeon.
Right, yeah.
Which was neat. We haven't seen one of those in a while.
This one looks like such a visual improvement over the old one. Just because I think it's called the RF Zeon. I don't know. They redesigned the head, and the head looked much more cooler, much more sinister. It must have been a pretty high-ranked guy too, because it had that custom trim on like the shoulder pads and parts of the armor that only upper officers like McCuve or Dozel had on their mobile suits. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. Like this guy, he was pretty up there.
Yeah. I called him when I was reading it. I was like, oh, he's got the royal shoulder pads. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we should say up to this point, sort of Sid has brazenly and unsuccessfully hit on Navi, but I think Navi and Def are clearly more of a thing, and so Def is pretty upset that Navi is being captured, and he basically punches the Gyan in the face and knocks its head off.
Yeah.
But then he goes to save Navi, but then he gets I think the Gyan had basically the Goof's whip, right? Which was neat. That. Yeah, some sort of whip cable thing. And he pulled Def away, and Def is, for the first time, forced to use the beam saber and kill an opposing soldier. And so that's what he does to the guy in the Gyan. And then meanwhile, up, back above Mars, the fleet, the fleet's not doing so well. Basically, all the ships are broken at this point. From all of Bosch is firing on everybody. And even him and the crew, they decide to just escape back to Mars. So they leave. And Novatoni, or whatever his name is, he gets control of the Tianum again, and then
Navi's getting her little tour.
Yes. So then we pick up where we left off on Mars, and Navi is being held at the base, where everyone was going, and she thinks it's a power plant, but what is it really, Isaac?
This part was really cool. Actually, this whole little tour was cool because we see that like this is actually a pretty huge facility. I think it was also cool that we see a lot of the pilots, like they take off their helmets, right? And they're like old men.
Yep.
And, of course, these guys were with Zeon back in the day. So it's been, 40 years plus. So, yeah, they're going to be pushing the limits there. Back to your question, though. The Oldsmobile Army, Mars Zeon, they've built a volcano-powered mass driver. And their plan is to use the internal, pressure of the volcano itself, which is, I think it's also the largest volcano in our solar system or something like that. They're going to use that to propel I forgot how many, a multi-ton.
84 tons.
An 84-ton projectile at the Earth. So it's a bit of a complex plan. Like, I'd like to meet who thought of this, because brilliant to use the volcano's energy, but at the same time, like, wow, really? This is what we've built?
Yeah, they said it took them 40 years to build this thing, which I guess that makes sense given that it's on Mars. But, I think they win a good prize here for creativity for an attempted super weapon. I'm not really sure if this qualifies as a super weapon, given that you can't really fire it at will.
And as we'll find out later, you can only fire it once.
So Navi, gets her tour. We see the weapon, which they call the Olympus cannon, or the Olympus Mons cannon. So Def and Sid, they make their way into the base to get Navi back. But then Sid, who now, because he lost Unit 2, he's now piloting a Garadoga Kai, which is a kind of a newer version of one of the suits we saw in Charge Counterattack. It's a Neo Zeon suit. And he gets shot from somewhere in the smoke from like a hidden suit. His Garadoga's arm gets blown off. And then we jump up to the fleet again, where Novatoni reveals his plan to destroy Olympus Mons with a nuclear missile. So Novatoni was like a weird guy this whole time to me. He kind of seemed like an inept captain. He kind of ignored Navi's logical conclusion earlier, and he just seemed real eager to use that nuke to like pull out the big key and put it in the computer and turn it to arm the warhead.
His grip on sanity seemed to collapse after the coup on the ship. He got shot. I thought he actually died in that panel. The way they kind of animated it, I was like, oh, that thing blew right through him. He's dead. I guess it was just a shoulder wound, but he managed to survive it. And yeah, that this point in the storyline, he just got a crazy look on his face. He just wants revenge for this humiliation. Who knows what he's going to have to say to explain himself when he gets back. But, the fewer witnesses, the better.
I also wasn't sure if maybe that was his mission from the beginning.
Yeah.
But even then, why would you go with the dropship plan if you plan to nuke it when you just nuke it straight away? I don't know.
it seems like a very Federation approach that, okay, we're going to use our numbers to attack. That didn't work. Okay, nuke anybody on the ground, even if it's our own people. And then we'll walk away and we'll win.
Yep. So Novatoni, he's arming his nuke, and then we cut back down to Mars, where the hidden suit that shot Sid, and at this point we think maybe Sid has died, and Def is super fired up at this point, and the hidden suit reveals itself to be a red redesigned F90, presumably Unit 2 that we saw get stolen by the Mars Zeon earlier in the story, and it has beam saber drawn. And there was a nice touch I liked in there. Not only had it been modified the design a little bit, they made it red, but in the first battle, Unit 2's shoulder armor had been blown off by one of the Oldsmobile suits, and they had replaced it now with a more Zeonic-looking shoulder armor on that one arm, which I thought was neat. Did you catch that?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And what do you think about the red coloring, though? Does this mean Bosch witnessed Char during Char's counterattack? He saw that red mobile suit and was like, you know what? I think I'd want one in the future.
I definitely think, red or green evokes Zeon. And given his proximity to the Axis shock, I'm sure Char's counterattack holds up.
Maybe that's what converted him. He was like so impressed by Char's mobile suit.
Gotta get one of them Sasabis. Yeah, so it turns out that, Bosch is piloting I'm going to call it the Red 90. And, from this point on, it's basically a duel between Def in the F90 and Bosch in his F90 Unit 2, or the Red 90. And Bosch's suit ends up being really faster than Def's suit. And Def at this point, we didn't mention this, but the F90 has these what are called hard points, which allows it to equip all these option packs for depending on what you want it to do. So you can have like a sniper version, or they call it the assault version that flies, or the close quarters combat version. And at this point, I believe the sniper pack had been equipped because he had those like really big sniper cannons on his shoulders, right? But he's in this really small close quarters base, so he couldn't really do much, and so Bosch was kind of fighting circles around him here. And then, total surprise to me, during the middle of the battle, the Olympus Mons cannon fires. I thought Def was gonna, defeat this guy and then go stop it from firing, but no. We see Olympus Mons erupt. They shoot the ball into the molten rock into the air. Did you think the cannon was gonna fire?
No, I thought they were going to destroy it, and then I was kind of happy when I realized, oh, they actually fired the weapon, because these Zeon pilots, this old mobile army, they're clearly genre savvy enough to know that you fire your super weapon, you don't wait for the countdown, just launch it, and then whatever happens afterwards, but the mission is complete.
That's right. And so Def wants to know why did you do this? Did you plan this? And Bosch says he didn't plan it, but it's a conspiracy that goes back decades to infiltrate the Earth government. But regardless, Def is pretty mad that he killed Sid, or at least he thinks he killed Sid. But Bosch, again, he's super fast, so he pins Def, and Def gets mad and pulls a what I would call like a Shiro Amada move. I think he ejects his sniper equipment into Bosch's face, basically, to kind of get him off him, which I thought was a good move, right? There's really nothing else he could have done.
Throw your backpack at the enemy.
Yeah. And then we cut right back up to space. We see Novatoni. Someone on the bridge tells him that, hey, something's coming our way. And Novatoni doesn't really seem to care, but then the guy goes, no, you really need to know because of the mass of this thing. And then what happens, Isaac?
It destroys the Admiral Tianum.
Admiral Tianum takes the Olympus shell of molten rock to the face, and Novatoni and his nuke kind of just go up in flames, and then that's the last we ever see of him.
Ironically, the nuke probably stopped that object, right?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that afterwards. The mass of the Admiral Tianum, I don't know if it would be enough to redirect the course of the Olympic Mons bullet, I'll call it. Yeah, I'm not sure. They didn't really show that. We don't really know what happened. Although I assume that throwing it off course even a little bit would probably make it miss Earth, given how far away Mars is. Even if you change the angle by 0.01 degrees or something.
Let me just chime in, even though I support Zeon. Let me just give a critique. Right after they fire it, the Olympus cannon, like an announcer says, evacuate the base. And I think Navi puts it together that, the firing of the cannon sort of destabilized. Oh no, I think they announced that the reactor was damaged by firing the cannon, right?
Right.
The
Yeah.
base's reactor was damaged.
Right.
So everybody's on borrowed time, and if you're in the base, get out. Going off that, does that mean that since their engineering skills were so flawed that they damaged their own reactor just firing the weapon that they spent 40 years building? Maybe we're giving them too much credit, and there's no way that thing's headed towards Earth. They think it is, but their math has to be wrong.
It could be a combination of the fact that mobile suits were fighting in the facility too. I don't know. You're right. I assume they were hoping they could at least fire it a few times. Maybe they underestimated the force of the eruption.
Apparently they did, because they damaged their own reactor and they have to evacuate their one base. Where are they going to go? There's nowhere to go.
Yep. So yeah, Novatoni and the Tianum, they get taken out by the Olympus shell. And then we cut back to, we get to see the finale of Def versus Bosch. And they start getting a little philosophical. Bosch says, you wouldn't understand this war. And he stole the F90 because he's wanted the power of a Gundam since he saw the light emit from the new Gundam pushing back Axis. And they start arguing about the different systems and the mobile suits, which turn out to not really be that important because he claims that Def is only one up to this point due to the AI system in the F90. And then Def just kind of says, screw you, and he slices off the Red 90's leg. But then the Red 90 shoots the F90's head off, and they're sort of both damaged. And then the Red 90 attacks from above. Def in his headless F90 raises his beam rifle, just like the final shot from the original Mobile Suit Gundam of the RX-78 shooting the Char Zeon. And that's kind of the conclusion of the battle. What did you think about the use of the final shot again?
I thought it was cool that it would come back. In a way, Bosch got what he wanted, right? I mean, he wanted to see the power of the Gundam, and there you go. You're going to get it exactly how it ended at the end of the 1 year war.
Yep. Especially given that the final shot was actually made by the original Gundam's AI computer. So I guess that's fitting. They were arguing over whether or not the AI was responsible for Def's piloting skills. Mm. And then eventually, we see Sid, who survived, and Navi. They're outside the base now, and the base is not looking too good. Obviously, it was destabilized and everyone left. And the F90 comes walking out. It's got no left arm, no head, but Def is alive. And then it ends on a really weird note. What are your thoughts on this? Earlier in the manga, Def had said that Navi's eyes looked familiar to him. And then on the last page, he says, oh, by the way, I remember why they look familiar. I've seen your eyes before in the eyes of Amuro Ray on the battlefield. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. What did you take away from that?
Yeah, I thought that was weird too. I couldn't really understand that. I thought to myself, oh, he must be, someone of note that these cadets would have learned about in I'm sure he was drilled into their heads at the academy. So they've seen his picture multiple times. But then I was like, did they meet him? Wouldn't that have been such a critical point of the story that we would have seen that flashback at the beginning or something like that? But I don't know. At that point, the story was over, and I had other questions, Brian. Where did the Mars Zeon go? You evacuate a base. Where do you go? And how are they going to get back? Can that dropship reach Earth? I don't think so. I don't know.
I agree. It must have been a weird situation, right? Because the Mars Zeon evacuated the base, and then our heroes evacuated the base. Wouldn't they both just be outside the base and continue fighting? I mean, they still don't like each other, right? I mean, did they both just fly in opposite directions and agree to fight another day? And then I agree. I guess at this point, we don't really know how much has been developed on Mars. I mean, clearly not as developed as, say, Mars is in the Iron-Blooded Orphans universe. But yeah, I don't know. At least as far as our heroes getting home, I think it's implied at the end that they were in that dropship and they were good to go, going somewhere. I guess I read into that ship did eventually come to Mars that was supposed to meet him there to get him home. And going home now, they have
a resupply ship, right?
Yeah, the resupply
that Navi
ship
was talking about. Yeah.
And I guess going home now, they have a lot less people to supply, given that their whole fleet basically was pretty much gone. But yeah, I agree. I don't know. I wonder how big the Mars Zeon is. Are there,
I mean,
do they have a lot of reinforcements, or was that it?
I took the fact that they essentially Def essentially walks into the base. I took that to mean that they had almost nobody left by that point in the story. That like they really kind of blew everything, in the initial battle in space. Yeah, taking out whatever was left of their troops when they went to go search the dropship and Navi rigged that explosive. That seemed to be it. It really didn't look like there was that many people, or at least mobile suits. I don't know who actually built the weapon itself and the construction team and all that. Maybe they had a Musai laying around or something that they could hop in. Well, Musais can't leave the atmosphere. Yeah, there must have been God, we're just grasping at straws. I'm grasping at straws, trying to figure out
There was a Kurgan on there.
Yeah,
Kurgan on there somewhere.
Everybody's that jumped into Zanzibar.
Yeah,
that we didn't see. Like, you need to tell the supply fleet that a Zanzibar's out here flying around. Yeah, so I don't know. I almost wanted like an extra couple pages where, we see like the resupply fleet land maybe or something like that, and we see Zeon guys in handcuffs or something. That would have made more sense or something. But yeah, it ended and I was like, I really doubt that dropship has enough fuel and supplies to get them to Earth. But I mean, for what it was, I'll buy it. We'll go with your theory that resupply fleet's just chugging along to Mars, and they're gonna ration their food and link up with it.
Any particular thoughts on the characters? There's really only, I'd say, 5 major characters in this story. There's Def, Sid, Navi, Bosch, and Novatoni.
Since this is such a bite-sized manga, I'm glad we didn't get bogged down in such a, in some type of, I don't know, pointless character development, like a love triangle that was filled with lots of arguments or something like that, right? They could have easily done that, but they didn't. Instead, Navi, you're the tech professional. Yeah, so your fellow pilots in your squad have some feelings for you. Sid, you're kind of a goof. Def, you're almost a blank slate, Def.
Right. Yeah.
Like he's very much like a video game protagonist, right? Where there's not a lot of personality, so you can kind of put yourself into his shoes. Bosch was probably the more interesting character, I thought, because what a unique idea really for a villain, because he was with the Federation, then he went over to Zeon. So I don't think we've really seen too much of that. So that was interesting. Novatoni was very much a corrupt Federation officer that we've seen before. I don't know what they do at that Federation Military Academy, but wow, they really make some bad ones.
They put out some winners for sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, Def, he was a likable character, but he seems very young, at least in terms of his piloting career. He hadn't even killed anyone at that point, or before the story started. So maybe he could be skilled in the future. But yeah, this seemed like real early on in his story. Sid, I agree, bit of an oaf, bit of a terrible, like a womanizer, but he's terrible at it. I think Navi and Bosch were probably my favorite characters, particularly Bosch, given, like you said, his motivation being unique. And Navi was just super useful the whole time. She was like the voice of reason amongst all the characters. Yeah. Sid and Def were always doing something stupid. And yeah, Novatoni, he shouldn't be in charge of anything. He's just eager to nuke things, I guess.
In his defense, actually, I don't know if the nuke was needed, right? That reactor was going to blow.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Imagine if the reactor blew and he nuked it. That would have been fun.
Something interesting about this story is that it's called Gundam F90, but really the only link to Gundam F91 is that it introduces us to miniature mobile suits.
And SNRI.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, SNRI, but there's no Crossbone Vanguard. They're barely at the frontier side for longer than like a few pages. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Like, they decided to not even do like a little skirmish with early Crossbone Vanguard or anything like that for this plot. Yeah,
and that's probably because people out there have read other sort of, I don't want to call this a prequel to F91, but that's kind of what it is. A lot of the companies do that. They'll put out like a prequel comic book or something. Like Marvel does that a lot for the MCU shows. Like there'll be a prequel comic to Avengers or Ant-Man or something. And if you go read it, it doesn't really impact the story of the movie too much. It may just inform it a bit. And I think they do that on purpose. They don't want the movies to be beholden to the comic books or anything like that. So that's kind of how I interpreted that, because I agree. There's not.
Yeah.
It gives you just enough about what has happened in the Universal Century since Neo Zeon, but there's not like anything that you need to read here in order to see F91.
If you enjoyed F91, if you're a Crossbone Vanguard fan or a Seabook Arno fan or anything like that, you might be disappointed by this. But if you go into this as just a Gundam fan, a sort of a quick, essentially a side story, a fleet on a mission, a group on a mission, kind of a one shot. It was really fun. I'm glad we did it, and if we didn't do it, I don't think I would have written it or read it on my own volition.
There was one thing I want to bring up about Def. So in the manga, I thought Def had black hair, but then if you go look up a color photo of Def, they give him blonde hair. I don't understand that at all. Do you?
I mean, yeah, they had to literally tell us that they painted the Gundam F90 that Zeon stole red. Otherwise it just looks like a dark Gundam. So yeah, I went through the whole thing assuming Def was, brunette, black haired, brown hair or something. Yeah. But yeah, you pull up his picture and he's blonde.
It makes no sense.
You know what, Brian? I'll tell you what happened. What happened was, after this operation, it was quite an experience for him. So he's gonna act out a bit. He's gonna bleach blonde his hair. He bleached it.
Bleached it. There you go.
Against regulations.
I think the only real suit that we should talk about, probably from a mecha perspective, I mean, look, there were a bunch of Jagans. We already talked about the Mars, Zeon, Gyeon. Yeah. We talked about the Adzoms. Yeah. Really, the star of the show here is the F90, right? So what did you think of the Gundam F90?
I feel like it was exactly what a one-shot manga Gundam should be. It didn't give us anything that was revolutionary that later on we'd be like, hey, why is the Federation not pumping out those? It was very almost basic. It was a visual Gundam. We looked at it, we knew it was a Gundam, but overall it didn't have anything that stuck out too much. So I'd be surprised if there's a lot of people that are F90 fans because it doesn't really do much that's unique compared to other Gundams. I even thought maybe we'd see kind of like F91, it's able to make that cool silhouette or whatever.
Yeah.
But we didn't really see that. It's very much a prototype. The only thing that's unique about it, I guess, is it's the first miniature mobile suit. It's a small Gundam. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoyed the F90. I thought it was a decent design. I think it's, at this point, there's been so many Gundams in that style. It's hard to do sort of like a basic Gundam and differentiate yourself at the same time. I did like that it had more blue on it than normal. It reminded me a lot of the Alex, which is a color scheme that I like. This did also spawn a bunch of model kits. I think there's over 20 something armor packs. In the manga, they only show 3, but in the model kit designs, I think there's over 20. They
always do that for every mobile suit, every Gundam. They're like, oh, there was an armor pack that was actually at side 1 or something, right?
Yep. That's how you can tell that this series was designed to hopefully sell some model kits with this hard point gimmick, where you can attach stuff to it, which I thought was pretty cool, in the series when he finally puts on the armor pack. I thought that was neat. Yeah. I do like the Unit 2 colors. It's very much like the Titans color scheme. It's only in a few pages, given that it gets stolen pretty much right away in chapter 1. But what did you think of the red F90?
I could have used a little bit more red.
not quite red enough.
No. I mean, it looks okay. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of odd seeing a red Gundam like that.
The white parts on it? What if they had left those dark? Because this was Unit 2, which did have the dark, sort of more Titans color scheme. I think if they had kept the red but left the other parts dark, it would have looked a little more menacing. I don't know.
Yeah. I felt like the white parts were kind of... it was too white. it was I don't know, a Spartan Gundam, a Roman soldier Gundam, or something. I don't know. You could have made it more Zeonic. Yes, you pointed out the cool little shoulder pad detail, the Zeonic spike, but not enough color was changed on it for me. It ended up looking not so much like a Gundam, but more like some unique mobile suit. Yeah.
So if you are a fan of the Gundam F90 design, they did just release a master grade in 2019, and they are now selling at least 5, 6, 7, 8 of the different armor packs as add-ons that you can, turn your F90 into the A type, the D type, the B type, the S type. A lot of the ones that were not in the manga. So there's one with a really cool looking sword thing, that we didn't see in here. So definitely, if you like the F90 and you want some armor packs, that new Master Grade looked pretty cool. I think it was a premium Bandai exclusive. So it probably will. It's going to be not the cheapest Master Grade around. And then the extra armor pack's probably going to run you another $30 to $50 depending on where you buy it. So choose your armor pack wisely, I suppose. Again, I believe the one that Def actually uses is the sniper type, the S type. That's the one with like the Gatling gun hands and the big cannons. And then I think the one that we see on like the cover or one of the covers is the D type, the one with all the missile pods. Do you remember that?
The destroyed type,
yeah,
which is a terrible name. Man, I mean, the Federation loves to do this, and you know what? They win wars, so I guess it actually works. But yeah, when you make your mobile suit adaptable by just slapping things onto it, it apparently wins you wars.
I would like to see maybe not a Master Grade, but maybe a Reborn 100 version of that Zeon, because there's not that many Zeon designs. I mean, there is that one Master Grade of the original Zeon from probably 10 years ago now.
But it's terrible.
Hey, there's some Zeon fans out there,
Yeah, but like they're few and far between. Are you a Zeon fan? Comment below. Tell me why.
If you are a Zeon fan, did you like the update to the Zeon in this series, the Remnant Forces Zeon? Anything else on this series, Isaac?
If you're on the fence about reading it, if you have the chance to read it, just go for it. It was a fun ride. It's very short. And you have to view it as a side story. It doesn't require you to know anything about the Crossbone Vanguard F91. You barely need to know stuff about the 1 Year War because it's really from the perspective of pilots that are so young, they didn't really experience it. At the end of the day, it's very much a short space fleet on a space mission type adventure. And I really recommended it. I had a good time reading it, and I think most people will too. It was cool.
All right, how many Haros would you give it?
Ooh. It ambushed. I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5 Haros because I don't read a lot of Gundam manga, and I really liked how I went into it blind, and I was so happily surprised. It was a fun little story. So yeah, for giving me a nice little digestible adventure, you get 4 out of 5.
I'm gonna give it 7.5 Haros. I'm gonna keep it to my 10 scale. I liked how self-contained it was. The characters were overall likable. It did not overstay its welcome. I was worried that maybe we would get bogged down with too many characters, given that it was such a short manga, and that didn't happen. The designs, they were good. They weren't like amazing or anything.
What was your favorite moment, Brian?
Ooh, my favorite moment.
Or a moment that stuck out to you, I guess.
My favorite moment, I think, was when the Olympus Mons cannon fired, because I didn't expect that to happen. And then I also didn't expect the shell to destroy the Admiral Tianum. So that one was good. That part was good too.
Speaking of didn't expect to happen, my part of my French, my oh moment was when Bosch revealed himself to be the traitor.
Definitely. Was that your favorite moment?
Yeah, I was reading it. I was like, oh. I was like, him? He's the traitor?
I thought for sure it was going to be Sid or Novatoni or both of them. Lovable, Bosch who told us the story about Amuro.
Yeah. It's like, all right, you guys are going to make great pilots one day. By the way, I secretly support this space fascist organization.
Yep. So one last thing I'll note is that Gundam F90, it is 30 years old at this point. It was never licensed for distribution in America, so it was not officially translated to English. It is, however, very obtainable. I won't tell you where to get it, but I'm sure you can figure it out.
A creative person could locate manga online, Brian?
I will neither confirm nor deny. There are a few more pre- or F91-ish era manga that I think we're going to try to explore here on the podcast. There's another one, Silhouette Formula F91, which is also from the 90s. There's also Gundam F90 Fastest Formula and Formula Wars 0122, plus, of course, Crossbone Gundam and all the Crossbone Gundam sequels. We'll try to explore those. as we continue on in our UC Next 100 journey, or the next 100 years of the Universal Century. If that's where we're going to go with new Bandai shows, I mean, me and Isaac, I think we want to be prepared. I don't know, read all the established lore before we get to the new stuff. So
brush up on our outdated late UC side stories.
Yeah. What's crazy to me is that, we probably read about F90 20 years ago, and it was still 10 years old, 12 years old, depending on when we read about it back then. And now it's even older. But hopefully, modern Gundam fans, if you're a fan of the Universal Century, hopefully you give it a chance. Check it out. It's kind of neat.
You should, because whatever team was in charge of this, I don't know if they did other manga or whatever, or involved in an anime or any other thing involved with Gundam, but it was a very well designed, compact adventure that you can knock out in one sitting. So can't recommend it enough. Don't need to buy some Gundam series that's 90 manga volumes long. Just check this one out. You'll have a good time.
So Isaac, because this is before F91, this is well in the path of the UC Next 100 project. Would you like to see this animated as an OVA? I'm not sure. And how many episodes do you think this would be? Because it would have to be pretty short. It would probably have to be shorter than 0080, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would say you could do this in 3.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
We do almost Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Literally like that. I'd like to see it again, but I'd like them to polish it just a bit more. Add just a little bit more to maybe the logic of the story and explanations, and answer some of our lingering questions at the end, and it'll be perfect. It'll be the perfect little 3-part miniseries or 2.5 hour, OVA.
Yeah, I agree. I think any longer than that, and it would overstay its welcome. That would lose one of the strengths of the series, that it was nice and short.
Yeah, definitely. And they'd be filling it at that point with pointless stuff like, in the 3-month journey to Mars, they're having some type of lovers dispute on their ship, and it gets really slapsticky and kind of silly. And we don't need that.
Yeah, please no.
No.
But yeah, spice up the battles, maybe extend them a little bit. I think a 3-episode OVA would be perfect.
Yeah, you could do a bit more on the ship as far as keeping us guessing who the possible traitor could be too. Maybe introduce more characters there or something like that. I don't know. Make it a whole mystery if you want.
Yeah, I agree.
There you go.
Again, if you're a Zeon fan, if you're an F90 fan, let us know in the comments below. So hit that like button, subscribe, and you can send us comments on YouTube or on Twitter at Colony Dropcast.
Also, leave a comment about what your theory is that happened to the projectile. Did its collision with the Admiral Tianen cause it to fly off course? Was it never going to hit Earth? Is the resupply fleet going to be able to track it and just blow it out of space? Knowing the Federation, is it actually on a direct course to Earth, but at the last minute they'll, I don't know, make anti-projectile Gundam, and then they'll send it out in its own side story to fight this lob of molten magma heading towards Earth.
Send us your side story ideas for what happens to the Olympus Mons shell that's floating out there.
Gundam volcano bullet.
All right, everybody. All right. See you next week.
Bye. Take care.